Ron, a little earlier, you were talking about failure and how sometimes failure can be a major positive, can be a positive. And I think we've all gone through, we've seen a lot of businesses that have pivoted, that have changed. At what point should a company pivot? And at what point after pivoting should a company give up?
Yeah, well, I would say be nimble always, but stay with your conviction. If you've started in a certain market space, you want to stay true to that and at least give it a good, strong try before you decide to pivot. If you do pivot, you want to pivot into an area where you have domain expertise, not into something completely radically different. I would much rather shut the thing down, return the rest of the capital, and start with a fresh idea on a clean piece of paper than try to, because you're going to be having an ugly cap table and you'll have all the issues of the investors' angst and carrying your employees forward in that kind of environment if you pivot too radically. Of course, the rare examples do exist. I mean, I think Fab.com is a great example of a pivot that was in a completely different area, and they did great doing it. But those are very low percentage kinds of pivots where very few companies succeed doing that sort of pivot. But pivoting into a contiguous area where you have a lot of knowledge and where the iteration of user data, let the data drive the decision. In other words, don't be too opinionated when you're doing this, because it is the internet, so you got lots of data. So be very, very sensitive to that information rather than your own biases as you're pivoting.
Ron, we have at this summit today a lot of entrepreneurs who are fundraising. As an investor, what are the very critical aspects of investment you want to make sure that that company has? What do you look for? And what do you won't invest unless those are present?
Well, first and foremost, there's 4 kinds of risks in an early stage company. The first is team risk. So you have to start with a great team. And ideally, it should be a team with a mixture of DNA from different backgrounds, probably more engineering centric. Sorry to say that for those that are not engineers in the room, but I think that allows you to solve the second risk, which is technology risk. So if you have some defensibility in the idea in the form of something that you created in college or something that you've been working on in your garage for some time, even as you kept your day job, well, that allows you to build. These days, if you have a 3-month lead or a 6-month lead, that's plenty. That's enough time. As long as you're nimble and you can keep ahead of the competition, that's as much as you can ask for in these fast-moving markets. So team risk, technology risk, market risk. Market risk is something that's hard to divine from day one. You won't know till you step into the market how much, the market's moving as you're building your idea and executing on your company. So you won't know exactly how to hit the timing right, but the market risk is important, and that's something you don't completely control, but an investor has to worry about that. And the 4th risk is, of course, execution risk, and that goes back to the team. So the execution risk is lower if you have a great team, so it always starts with building a A-class team. And I always like to say A players early on in the DNA of a company hire other A's because they're not insecure, they're very smart, so they're happy hiring other really smart people. B's hire C's and C's hire failures. So you don't want to have, eventually, as your company gets large, you end up diluting anyway as a natural progression of building the business, which is why bigger companies find it harder to innovate, is because they're diluting themselves over time. So as a young company, you don't want to do that. You want to try and keep it really, really smart people, but with a constructive engagement within the different players on your team, everyone working towards, once you make a decision, everyone should fall in line and pursue that goal.
Ram, you've been spending a lot of your personal time on nonprofits in the K-12 education space. Why and what do you hope to encourage?
Well, I think we have a pretty good higher education system as it relates to math and science, especially computer science. We suffer from not having a great K-12 STEM education system, especially from grades 5 through 12 where it's critical to have, all of you have probably remember a great teacher in grade school or in middle school or in high school that changed your life and changed the trajectory of where you wanted to go to college and what you did and had that impact. I think we're challenged in public school education today, and finally I think technology can make a difference. And so my favorite sort of nonprofit in this space is Guru. Of course, Khan Academy and others are doing a great job with pedagogical content. Guru hopes to take a lot of the content that already exists from the great teachers and be able to share it on the internet more broadly. And so it's an index or a playlist for content in math and science. We have 1.2 million such resources that we've indexed and curated and made available. It also has great lesson plans and quizzes and so forth for teachers to be able to use. We're still in private beta because it takes a bunch of time to actually do all this right. But I'm taking economic volunteers from the likes of Google, Facebook, and other places who are willing to give back to do this versus go and do yet another startup and make more money. So this is wonderful that we have enough people involved in such an effort. And I think the time for technology to help education has come, because despite the fact that not everybody could afford a laptop or a tablet or whatever, they are able to go to a public library or are able to go to the computer lab in their school and be able to work and access this material. And most schools now are pushing their homework and their grading systems and everything through their online website. And so it's a great place to start to make a difference. But it's early days.
Ram, first of all, I know you have a board meeting at 2 o'clock. It's 1:30. We're well past our allotted time. I could be speaking to you for hours. You've been terrific. The audience still hasn't gotten to lunch yet, so we have that coming up next. But I really want to thank you for coming here. We're privileged to have you and to hear your words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck to all of you.